Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are with our second of the theories of economic development, which would be Wallerstein's world systems theory. And you guys probably remember this. We've talked about core, semi-periphery, and periphery before. And so what we want to know here is, what is the theory? As I said, we already know that it presented the idea that countries were either in one of three stages: core, semi-periphery, or periphery, based on their economic development. And this development reflects their history. And one thing I want to point out is that you guys might remember with the most recent warm-up we did that we have Southeast Asia. It's identified here as being part of the periphery, but this is an older map, and this is just kind of giving you an idea. And it's not really accurate anymore. So you want to look at the map that's in your textbook for this one, and just keep in mind that there are countries that are no longer in that periphery. So like Southeast Asia has moved into the semi-periphery, as well as parts of Eastern Europe and North Africa. So this isn't the most up-to-date map. So just kind of keep that in mind. Anyhoozle, the theory was introduced in the 1970s, and it's a dependency model, meaning that the countries exist in the world together and are intertwined, not developing in isolation. And we'll talk about dependency theory in a minute. It also includes elements of politics and economics, so it can sometimes be seen as a political theory or an economic theory, depending on like what perspective you're taking. And what's important here is that the status of a country can change over time. Core countries are the ones who industrialize first. They're the most advanced with industrial systems and highest consumption rates. Their economy is mostly tertiary and above. It actively exploits and dominates the semi-periphery and periphery, and it keeps them underdeveloped in order to keep their place intact. And it benefits the most from international trade. The semi-periphery is a mix of primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors at an intermediate level of development. They tend to have a much larger secondary part of their economy, and they're moving away from the primary sector. Sometimes they are literally between the core and the periphery in terms of geography, and they are what are called middle-income countries. So they're not poor, but they're not wealthy. They're just kind of in the middle. And then the periphery would be economies that are focused primarily on the primary sector. They have low levels of consumption, and they're exploited by both the core and the semi-periphery, and are the least developed countries. Now, there are some criticisms of this theory as well. First of all, it has a global scale of analysis that ignores the complexity at lower scales, which means that it classifies countries as a whole and ignores variations within a country. And you guys might remember that when we talked about, for example, Belgium, the northern part of Belgium is very highly developed, but the southern part is not. And so that idea of there being variations within a country is kind of ignored by the Wallerstein world systems theory. It also doesn't explain how countries can improve their status and ignores the role of international aid in changing economies. And so it can be overly simplistic at times. And it downplays the role of culture. It's a bit outdated because it's based on industrial production. And a lot of places are now post-industrial, and it kind of ignores that shift because it was made in the 70s when industrialization was still alive and well in a lot of parts of the world. So it's not quite as up to date. And like I said, it's a little static sometimes as far as like not static, it's overly simplistic in the way that it explains things at times. And it's looking at it from a too big of a scale and doesn't really look at those differences. Because like, for example, the United States, if you start looking at different states and the development of different parts of the United States, you see a lot of variation, which is not reflected by the world systems theory at all. All right, that's going to be it for this one. I'll pick up with dependency theory in just a moment.